Hello YouTube. Today we're going to be doing an honest review of Laphroaig's quarter cask Scotch. This was the first peated Scotch that I ever had. First tried it about 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm excited to share it with you today. So we've already got our pour here. I'm going to give it a nose. And you already get a pretty big bouquet going on here. You taste a fair amount of sweetness. That probably comes from the influence of the ex-bourbon casks, as well as the quarter cask it was finished in. You smell a lot of peat, you smell brine, and there's a little bit of a medicinal kind of quality to it. If you've ever tasted a Laphroaig Scotch before, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's give it a taste. It's got a good, strong palate with a lot of flavors. You definitely get a fair amount of sweetness coming from both the whiskey and the wood influence. It's very present. You also get the typical Laphroaig campfire sort of taste. When I first tried this, it almost tasted a little bit like cigar ash, but I guarantee you that it is not as repellent as cigar ash is on the tongue. Now, something that I think is fantastic about this whiskey is that despite the fact that it's bottled at 48% ABV, it goes down terribly smooth. And part of that is owed to the peated nature of the whiskey. Most peated scotches are going to be able to go down a lot smoother at a higher ABV compared to non-peated scotches. And that has something to do with the chemical processes, but it is a little bit above my pay grade. Let's give this another taste. Some things that weren't there before is I taste a little bit of vanilla and caramel now. Other than that, it's a pretty similar palate. On the taste, it does feel a tad medicinal. That's hard to describe, but it probably has something to do with the briny seaside nature of this Scotch, being as it is from Islay. I'm blown away every time I taste this whiskey. For the price you're paying, I don't think that you can get a much better peated Scotch. I'm going to give this a little bit of water and see how that impacts the flavor and the palate. Topped it off there. And a little water. Stir it up here, give it a nose. It smells a bit sweeter to me after adding the water, and a lot of the peat and smoke has been subdued. It's still there, but it's not as strong as it was before. I taste more caramel after adding the water, and just like the nose, the palate is a bit subdued. I was not expecting this to taste very well with the water added, but I'm pleasantly surprised. You can tell it's the same whiskey, but it's a completely different palate, and I like that. It's quite surprising, and I'm very pleased with adding the water. Next time I drink this by myself, I might add a little bit. It feels more velvety too on the tongue, and that campfire type of finish that you get doesn't feel as astringent after adding the water there. It's quite good. A little bit more about this whiskey. I did some research online trying to find out exactly how long it's been aged, and although I didn't find anything officially from Laphroaig, the consensus is that this has only been aged for about 5 years, and it has a wonderfully complex palate for only being aged 5 years. Now, why would they only age this 5 years when they're charging $60 to $70 a bottle? Well, it's because they age it in quarter casks at the end of its life. Finishing in quarter casks actually might be the more correct term. And the reason they did this is that Scotch used to be shipped in barrels that were about the quarter size of a regular barrel. And this would impart different flavors than the regular aging process would. And Laphroaig wanted to replicate that. And I'm glad they did, because this is probably, I don't know. I would say this is one of the best peated scotches I've ever had. If I had to choose between this and, say, a Lagavulin 16, which costs about $20 more, I would probably pick this over a Lagavulin. There's only one other peated scotch in this price range that I think compares with it, and that is the Talisker Distiller's Edition, which I will be reviewing for you guys sometime soon. So without further ado, let's take our last sip, give any final notes, and get out of here. That warms you up, makes you feel good inside. Tastes a little bit more like a toffee than a caramel on that last sip. That gentle smoke and peat is still there. I've got nothing but good things to say about this scotch. When you include the fact that you can get this for around $60 to $70, I'd say that this whiskey is easily an 8 out of 10 or more. It's one of my favorites. So, thanks for joining me today. Hope you have a good day. And if you can find it, get yourself a bottle of this Laphroaig quarter cask.